All right, mates, welcome back. Little lake house update. Weather, obviously, if you're anywhere in the Mid-Atlantic, you know we're getting dumped on, so going to be a little bit later in the afternoon today for any probably pre-fishing or anything going on out there. So I wanted to do a quick video because I got a whole bunch of new stuff that really I'm going to be trying out here in the next few weeks, and I'll get everybody updates on them, especially back to the custom bait manufacturer producers. Support your custom bait makers 100%. You'd be surprised if you take that gamut down that rabbit hole. The quality of actual baits, superior quality of baits being produced by custom bait makers. It is unbelievable what is coming. For everyone who participated in the swim bait culture raffle to support autism, thank you very much. If you followed that link and participated in that and got some awesome, you're talking like $100, $120 swim baits and glide baits from those guys. You're talking about the top. If you got to think about it, when people ask me about it, about custom bait makers, you know, there's really a few tiers of custom bait makers. You know, there's hybrids, the people that do both, like me, that'll do soft plastics, pour soft plastics from molds, as well as paint crankbaits, do jigs, because you've done that your whole life. If you've had a grandpa that ever fished, that tied his own flies, that tied his own jigs, you know what I'm talking about. It's just in your blood. So you got soft plastic, then you've got crankbait, right? Either custom crankbait painters or repainters. So you got repainters that you could send them your crankbaits, like I've done. Tons of stuff. Pick up crankbaits at yard sales. Pick up wherever you're at that are older crankbaits or crankbaits that you love that have just gotten so beat up. You can have them custom repainted. Okay. Then you've got crankbait painters that will paint straight from new blanks. The blanks coming out on the market in 2022, 2023 are of superior quality to any of the blanks that you've seen in recent years. I mean, from rattles, we're going to cover that here in a second, but from rattles to thump to everything, to the bearings inside them, everything is just being innovative, constantly innovative inside the custom bait maker community. You've got glide baits and swim baits, right? Other than outside of, we've got our love jig makers, guys that pour, even guys on the Bass Elite Series pour their own jig heads. Okay, so you've got that, and you want to roll, you know, whatever segment of fishing that you could think of. You've got these elements to where you can go into the custom lane, okay, and you can work with the custom bait maker, all right, and talk about your lake, talk about your river, talk about where you live in the country, where do you predominantly fish, right? I mean, you need to want to focus on those things, because not everything, you know, transits. If everything translated to every single lake and every single pond and every single river throughout the entire country, you wouldn't need $500 worth of baits in your arsenal, or $1,000, or $5,000. Okay, you wouldn't need that, right? You need one bait. Boom, just take it everywhere. Have at it, right? Everybody fishing the same bait. Have at it, right? Pure competition, right? I mean, think about it. But fishing's not NASCAR, okay? It's not same spec car, same everything. Everything exactly the same. So a car doesn't beat you, a driver beats you. Well, fishing's not set up that way, okay? And so not everybody runs the same boat. Not everybody runs the same kayak. Not everybody runs the same trolling motor. Not everybody runs the same anything, okay? So there's so many factors. So what's going to elevate? What's going to change? I'm of the philosophy, having fished more rivers, that, you know, forage species dominates, okay? That those people that can read rivers, read the water, that have grown up on the water, fish primarily in the water, have a significant advantage, okay? Then say, you know, have you ever heard the argument, you've ever heard an angler talk about whether or not they're a river angler or a reservoir, deep water, offshore kind of angler, right? Why is that? Experience, one, but the setups are like the whole method is completely different. A lot of it's like is psyche in your psyche, but a lot of that is completely different. Lake forage, impoundment forage, reservoir forage does not act in the same manner as river forage does. River forage is going to move. Smallmouth bass, regardless of what many people say, if you talk to biologists, if you've been on rivers or studied biology or studied those things, smallmouth bass move. They can move within a 4-mile range. So you ever wonder why you're on the Upper Potomac, you're on the Susquehanna, you're on the Monocacy, and you're on the Allegheny, you're on different rivers and all. This spot's been awesome, and then you show up and it's just dead, right? And our inclination is the fish are here. It must be my bait. I need to keep changing out my baits. No, the inclination is you need to move, okay? Because the bass have moved. They will follow the river bass. While there are some that are resident, will follow the forage, what's happening. And knowing the changes in your forage species. If you go on my Facebook fishing page, JL Scott Fishing and Eats, if you check that out, look at the posts about the actual shiners and minnows and chub, okay, and darters and all those things. What's their cycle like? Like we all talk about this time of year, spring, for the spawn, right? And it's always about the spawn because it's such a great window in the cycle of the year to catch big bass. But very rarely do you see many people talking. They're thinking, but they're not talking to you about forage. What about the forage spawn? How does the forage spawn for shad in major rivers or in major impoundments, okay? Or river herring in rivers or blueback herring in lakes and impoundments, okay? How does their spawn impact bass? We've got the bass spawn on its own cycle, which tends to come before the shad spawn, the river spawn, the shiner spawn. Okay, all this stuff happens, right? And so that's where you get into the argument, the real argument between the pre-spawn, spawn, and post-spawn bass bite is almost all predicated on forage species, okay? Water temperature, forage species, and bottom composition, period. Biology. That's all it is. That's all it is, mates. It's biology. The temperature, the barometric temperature, the pressure, all of this stuff changes, okay? As well as what? Grass, right? Grass development throughout the spring. And that's what we're going to talk about now with Lipless Crankbaits, okay? I was just out on the Upper Potomac. You guys know where I'm from if you followed me for more than a blink. You know how much issues like the Shenandoah has had in the last decades, right? You know about different things because of what has happened with runoff, what's happened with deposits, all of that stuff. If you're from Pennsylvania, you've experienced the same thing in the Clarion River. You've experienced it in parts of the Allegheny, okay, that fish so much better than other parts, right? We call them sections or stages of the river. Why is it that certain sections of the river or stages of a particular watershed produce bigger bass or produce quantity bass? A lot of that has to do with runoff, industrial, revolutionary influenced historical runoff, okay? But we're coming back, all right? A lot of the rivers are coming back. Clarion's coming back. Allegheny's, on fire, okay? Shenandoah coming back. A lot of all that is impacted in grass development. Just out on the Upper Potomac, there were spots 10 years ago, mates, that were full of grass. Think Susquehanna. Middle of the river channel, full of grass, right? 3 feet of water, full of grass, okay? We've had crazy flooding, okay? Like if you go back to the last decade, high water, historic high water levels, all of that impacts your grass. And when all that impacts your grass, that impacts your bass. And when all that impacts your bass, that impacts your lipless crankbait success. Okay? Because you run that lipless crankbait predominantly in the spring, though I know a lot of people fish it year round and should. And I've had great success with it in the fall. So it's not all predicated on grass, but when the grass starts to come in, the bass are going to move to the grass, okay? For whatever reason. If there's no wood, if there's no city structure, if there's nothing that they can actually relate to, grass provides them especially if you're a river bassin, grass provides them, or back eddies provide them a way to conserve their energy during the late spring, summer, all of those things. out of the current flow. You guys know that. Grass helps. Grass also attracts other species, which inevitably, smallmouth bass, largemouth bass, walleye, you name it, tiger muskie, you name it, are going to feed off of. Okay, like they're all going to relate to a food source. Okay, that's what you want to think about. So one of the base things I tell people for rivers, different than lakes. Okay, lakes are a totally different beast. Okay, things like Lake Anna, Smith Mountain Lake. I mean, from a biology perspective, it's not nearly as interesting because there's not stuff you can get your hands on. Right, you can go out to the river. I could be on the river in 15 minutes. Okay, I could be on the river in 15 minutes. In pretty much any section stage of the Upper Potomac above Great Falls, right? So, and I can stick my hand into the composition. I can feel how cold the bottom of the river is. I can put my hands in the mud, right? I can look at the species, the forage species. I can see where they're relating. I can look at the bluegill. I can look at the crappie. Yeah, they're crappie in the Upper Potomac, and them some big ones now. Like, I don't know what that is because I haven't fished really for crappie since I was really young, and that was usually with older back then. So that was like the 80s when the people I was fishing with were then 60, 70, 80 years old, okay? So that tells you right there, like, just there's a significant amount of people, especially in the South, that love crappie fishing. So my recommendation for that is when you arrive for a tournament or you arrive for a fishing trip, chat up the old timers at the ramp that are crappie fishing because they're going to know where the crappie are. They're going to know where the bait fish are. And you can bet bass are not going to be that far behind. Now, sure, if you're bass fishing, you're going to be catching a couple crappie and all that, and you got to deal with that. But the bass are not going to be that far away, okay, in early spring, okay, and then in the heat of summer, all right? That's just the way that is. And if you get on them, you're going to get on them. I mean, you can have a fallen tree that'll have 70 to 100 crappie on it in the river. And that may be the only tree for 300 feet, 500 feet, but it's going to have all of them on it. And that's going to attract outside adjacent to that structure bass. That's why you find when you're fishing lakes oftentimes, especially heavily docked lakes, the crappie and stuff could be relating to the actual dock sometimes, and you're not catching any largemouth bass off the dock. One of the biggest tips I was ever given was to fish the adjacent banks, especially if there's rock. The adjacent banks 15 yards from the dock. This is absolutely where I caught three, 4.5 and up bass at Lake Murray. Okay, not on the dock, but adjacent to the dock. So that's just an interesting development for lake and for lake impoundments and reservoirs. Rivers, on the other hand, the relation is a little bit different. So with lipless crankbaits, what is your strategy, right? Why are you throwing a lipless crankbait, right? Why? And I always ask people, like when people tell me what a great deal, people post, and I know it's annoying, but people will post tons of pictures of their catch, which is great. Everybody loves that. But that, from my head as a biology, person from college and as, following river keepers I want to know what you learned. It doesn't matter to me whether you caught a 5-pound bass or a 7-pound bass. I mean, growing up in the mid-Atlantic, it's not Florida, but I mean, there's probably 4 or 5 places you can go and catch a 5-pound bass, okay, within 2 hours of Washington, D.C., all right? And you get that all the time. That's not what I'm concerned of. That's great, but I'm concerned of, okay, what'd you learn? What'd you learn there today? What'd you learn at Hunting Run? What'd you learn on the Lower Potomac? What'd you learn at Matawan? What'd you learn, like Upper Bay? What are you learning? Like, what are you, that's translatable, right? For those people that are in your circle that will share information. Now, some people will not share any information with you, and that's fine. They're not going to catch any fish in heaven, okay? That's just the way I look at it. Like, if you don't share your knowledge of what you're learning on the lake, okay, and share with people and have it be an interaction, they share with you, you share with them. If you're a non-sharer, okay, that's fine. you could be a tournament angler and you don't want to give up spots. You don't want spots burned. You don't want whatever. And I don't ever ask. No one ever asked me, and I never asked anybody. That's frankly looking right out for spots. But you want to be engaged. Other people, grow the sport. Grow people. Take a kid fishing. Right. You can't take a kid fishing if you're taking a kid fishing, but you're not telling him why you're throwing a lipless crankbait. Like why are we fishing this? Like, right? Get them started early, educate them early on, okay, this is why, son, this is why, or your daughter, this is why we're going to switch from, a square bill to a lipless crankbait. Okay, and explain to them why, right? And it can't just be like because everybody else is doing it. You follow that, everybody else is doing it. That's the cereal crowd, and that's cereal with an S, not a cereal for breakfast. And everybody's throwing the same thing, right? And you want to differentiate. So I got some lipless crankbaits here, all very different. And what I mean by all very different is they're not just painted different, okay, to mimic the forage inside the river or your lake, impoundment, or reservoir, okay? Their rattle, their thump, their action, okay? All of these things are different, okay? It's not just working with a custom bait maker and have them paint you a crankbait. There are a lot of things that go into it when you sit down and you work with a custom bait maker. It's like, and the really good custom bait makers, okay, will ask you the questions, okay? They will ask you, where are you fishing? Or do you know the forage of your fishery? Okay, let me take the time to look at what the forage is, okay? Where in your lake, in your river, in your area, in your region, in your state, okay? Because they want you to be successful. They don't just want you to buy their bait, unlike an aisle at a big box store. They don't just want you to buy your bait with no support, okay? They want to set you up for success. And so that is a critical component on, okay, this is what I'm looking for. This is what these are my pros. These are my cons. These are my failures on the river. I've not been able to get a good solid lipless crankbait bait on the lower Potomac. I don't know why. Why is that? Right? Everyone's telling me to throw red in spring so I need a red crankbait or a red lipless crankbait, right? That's usually how a conversation starts. But that's not always the case. And the reason why is you do not know exactly when. Now, will you get bites on an orange, a red, a yellow? I'll cover that in another video when I have all my crawl out. Okay, I've got a few out today that are lipless, but all the crawl cranks. There's certain times, yeah, okay, you're going to get bit. Reaction bites, doesn't matter what the color is. It really doesn't, okay, in my opinion. Fish can only see red and green, okay? So, like, that's the reality. Like, okay, everything else is all the coleslaw color that they don't, okay? That's great. It's great. I mean, those are great spinnerbait colors, right? Because that's what we are. But they don't see that, okay? They're only seeing through their cones. They've got single cones and dual cones, okay? They're only seeing reds, things of reds and greens, okay? And so you've got to think about that, okay, when you're looking at bass following. They're following your bait based on noise, okay? Disruption noise in the water column because they've got a heightened sense of hearing, okay? As well as sight, okay? And then you can add smell to it if you're using attractant and things like that, and a lot of people do. So you've got to understand that there are so many factors into that, right? So when you deal with a custom bait maker, you want to look at all of those things, okay? Right size, right weight, what kind of hooks do you want, okay? Now, has anyone on an aisle at a big box store asked you about, well, would you like to have the hooks changed out? No, okay? No. They've got their supply. They've got their price point they want to hit. They're using whatever hooks they're using and whatever contracted hooks they got. When you work with a custom bait maker, you can ask him, what hooks can you have? Do you have owner hooks? Okay, whatever it is, whatever your preferred hook is, that custom bait maker typically can find out, okay, I can get those for you, right? Or at the end of the day, you'll have to replace out those hooks. But what are you going to do with those hooks when you replace them out, right? If you're not going to use those hooks, you just wasted the hooks. And we don't want to do that. Okay? We don't want to waste. There's no reason to waste, right? That's why. It's a conversation. So, lipless crankbaits, lake house, still pouring out. So, you basically have what I consider to be two categories. There's probably multiple categories, but two categories. I've got my early spring panfish type, okay, lipless crankbaits and crawl. Now, when the crawl break through the mud in your river, state, county, state, area, region, whatever, is totally predicated on the weather. Okay, it's predicated on that composition on the bottom floor and the water temperature and all of that, like everything else, right? So once they finally break through the surface, that's when you're going to start to see a transitioning of feeding. But until then, and then after that initial break, okay, what are smallmouth bass in the river or largemouth bass, what are they feeding on? If the crawl's not available, what are they feeding on, right? And what will they go back to feeding on after they've gotten their fill of crab? During pre-spawn, no crab. Spawn sometimes aligns with crab. I mean, a lot of it depends on how late the spawn is. Okay, and then post-spawn period, there are times when you can basically just stick your hand in the bottom of the Susquehanna River and pick up a dozen to 2 dozen crabs. Like, it's that bad. Upper Potomac's not nearly like that. Susquehanna is crab fest. It's just crab fest. But Susquehanna is also known for what? Shiners and minnows and darters, right? That's an easy lunch for a largemouth or smallmouth bass. Predominantly smallmouth. Easy. Don't have to exert a lot of energy. Boom. Ambush them, take them out. So, when the grass is starting to come in a little bit, or even if it's not, I have had success on the Upper Potomac with lipless crankbaits where there's very little grass, okay? And it's rock and gravel, sandstone, limestone in portions of the river, okay? If there's no grass, the fish figure it out. If there is grass in the river, you can bet they're nearby because they are going to find that. They're going to move towards that and be back off it, either in a back eddy off a river current flow or whatever. And that's the mother lode, okay? And what I mean by mother lode is, again, I'm speaking to the angler, recreational angler, the angler who is not competing in a tournament, okay? Because anglers that compete in tournaments have and need to have a totally different mindset. I'm talking about the people who want to go out and catch 50 smallmouth bass this afternoon or tomorrow or Sunday, okay? That's who I'm talking to, okay? Now, in the midst of that 50 smallmouth bass, there could be 3, 4, 17s, 18s, I don't know, a 19. The other day there was a 20, okay? But predominantly they're going to be 12 to 15 inches, okay? That's just, and you need to know your fishery by working with your fishery biologist. You need to gauge those things and educate yourself to understand, is my expectation too high? Like, I'm out looking for a 22-inch smallmouth in a river or section of a river that the last 3 electrofishing surveys done over the last decade hasn't produced a single one. Your expectation is a little bit high, mate. Okay? But the 12 to 15, 4 years ago, right, had an incredible number of smallmouth caught in it, 43 or 63 or whatever when they did the shock, right? Well, where are those bass now? Okay? And so, predominantly protecting a resource is returning catch, photo, release, or returning back after a weigh-in, or keeping, the habitat sustainable, okay, and returning fish. So they should be bigger, right? That's basically what you want to look at. So you've got panfish. Let's start with early forage. Okay, say it's just about spawn or right at spawn, because there's going to be a lot of baby bass, okay, during spawn and post-spawn, right? And so part of that forage isn't just bluegill, okay, and any variation of, okay? All right? Primary, early on, spring, always a winter, okay? And let's listen to this. This one has this sound. When I was telling you about thumps and sounds, it's more of a thump. It's like two thumps, okay? Pumpkin seed. Look at the color on that. Now, why is that significant? You know, a lot of people just see a bunch of fancy colors, right? Why is that significant? Is it significant because of the pumpkin seed? A little bit different. Hear that? Little bit different rattle. It's got a little smaller one in there, okay? But why is pumpkin seed a good choice? I will tell you, just like your shiners, okay, is that flash in clearer water with the sun out is almost like, I'll get to when I do a couple videos on blades for chatterbaits, it's almost like having a gold blade. You see it in the water column, the flash in the water as the sun comes through the water column, hits the bait, and you're turning it, okay? And even if you're burning it, this is doing this. That light is hitting and reflecting off of the coloration that you have. And if you're working with a custom bait maker, I highly encourage you, if that's your bite, if that's something that you are looking for, you want to ask what epoxy resin or what epoxy actually the bait maker is using to seal his baits or her baits, okay? Because if not, email me, message me, and I will get you the top two, what I think to be the top two, that will create even more shine and glare reflection off your bait, okay? So that was pumpkin seed bluegill, okay? Got another different variation of what I call this one the springtime, okay? The late spring bluegill pattern. So, and this one is all small bearings, okay? Hear the difference in the rattle? Okay? It's a bunch of little rattles if you open it up, okay? Little ball bearings. Totally different. Now that sounds exactly like bait fish. Any of you old timers, by old timers I mean you probably been doing it for like 20 plus years. Okay, technology old timers. Thing called Hydrowave, I think was what it was called. Do you remember that? When it was really big in the Elite Series in bass, it was like the little thing that you could put on your trolling motor that basically sent sounds of bait balls and bait fish out. Listen to those sounds. I'm not saying to go out and buy a Hydrowave. I don't even know if they're still out there. But it was really popular for a while, and then I don't know if it's still popular. I haven't seen one for a few years from anybody. But if you've ever been a co-angler and you've been in a boat with someone with that, and you hear that, note the actual things, these were recordings that they recorded from actual fish, okay, bait fish. And when they get really active and stuff and the noises they make. That's what your rattle and thump is really supposedly supposed to be mimicking. It's to draw attention for the bass to those things. Doesn't matter what your what bait. They all have a particular different noise to them. Okay, so crappie. Okay, perfect. Rivers, lakes, impoundments, reservoirs. Perfect. Okay, a little deeper thump. Okay, so that tells me it's got at least one bigger bearing to it. All right, love this. I love this pattern. Okay, I'm doing a video here from a Crank X Pro Fishing. Sent me a underspin crappie. I'll put that video up on Instagram. Incredible job. Now we've got game species. Smallmouth bass. Okay, smallmouth bass. Why is that? Because they will eat their own. Okay. Okay, two bigger rattles, one small one. Baby bass. All right. So there you have your panfish, your forage fish. I don't have any shiners out today because they're already up. They're already tied on. Sorry, they're already locked and loaded, ready to go for the trip Sunday on the river. So now let's talk about the elephant in the room come mid-spring. Crawdad, crawfish, crayfish, mudbug, doesn't matter what you call them, okay? You can tell a lot about a person when they talk about fishing, because you know where they're from. You kind of dictate what state they're from, what part of the country they're from, all of that stuff, just based on terminology. Different people use different terminology for the same thing. Minnows, right? Blunt nose minnows, golden shiners, polyfish shiners, rosy fish shiners, spot tail shiners, swallowtail shiners, chubs, river chub, creek chub. Okay, darters, right? Sculpin, like all this stuff. You can kind of tell how, immediately, okay? So for craw, obviously, you've got the color. I'm going to do a video solely on crawfish because there's a lot of stuff that's to cover in that. But we're going to talk about just the rattle and the thump for the crawfish. Once you've dialed in that the craw are present or even not present if you're going for reaction bites, because, the fish are hungry, whether they're coming right out of spawn, so they're hungry, or going into spawn, they're feeding up because of spawn, all that stuff wherever you're at. You go with crawl pattern. Love this pattern right here. Why? Because it has the orange and the red hinge to it. See that on the top? But it also has the yellow. Now, why is the yellow chartreuse lime green color such a big deal? Okay. Remember I talked about fish seeing red and green. Where are fish, your largemouth bass fisherman? For smallmouth, it's going to be reaction, all that. But you're a largemouth bass fisherman. Where are fish relating to right now? In May. April, May. Where are they relating? They're relating to the bottom. Why are they relating to the bottom? Because they're either A, transitioning to spawn, or they're already at the spawning grounds, and or they're already protecting the spawn, which means they're low to the bottom. They're not high, 5 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet up, okay? They have found their spot in 3 feet of water, and they are low, okay, towards the bottom. Now, depending on where you're fishing, okay, impoundment, reservoir, lake, okay, you know what the depth of your lipless is going to be. It's probably going to be like this, above them, okay, above them, not at their level. So they're going to be looking up, and they're going to be seeing that flash in the water column because it's yellowish green, okay? And that's going to catch their attention. The noise first, okay? So that's why I tell, boom. For the same reason why one trick for a lot of these and for crankbaits for people that old-timers, at least I consider them old-timers, taught me a while back, change your hooks to red because they see red, right? Looks like a wounded fit, right? Is to paint or nail polish from your wife, your daughter, red on the bottom. You could paint red all down here on the bottom of any crankbait that you get. Nail polish isn't going to friggin' mess the epoxy up or whatever that, even if it's your cereal baits from big box stores. You can add that with a red Sharpie. You can add it with nail polish. You could do whatever, okay? And that's a neat little thing that will trigger bites, mates. There's no argument about that, okay? Because they see that. That looks like a wounded, bait fish. So, 3 more. All different. This is a Hellcat from Brian Chapman, okay? The rattle on that. I love the rattle on that. Darker color. Has a little blue hinge. Upper bay, upper bay, upper bay. If you know anything about Maryland, you know about blue crab. You just know, okay? You got more of a gray brown, different type, okay? Still has a little bit, but see that different brown right there? See that? That's a perfect match to after these crab break through. The mud bugs break through from the mud, come up, walking, okay? They're catching everything else. It's in the water column, the light, everything, the shell. They're developing themselves. They're, you know what I'm saying? And then they start, their colors start to come in, okay? And then you've got another one for black and blue, okay? Which to me is simply just a coloration pattern, a poplar pattern in the river, poplar pattern on lower Potomac, especially coloration. Bass down there just love black and blue, and they love watermelon red flank, and they love green pumpkin. That's just the way it is. And the reason why I set these out, and I wanted to talk, is one, I had the time this morning because of the weather. But I want to show you the difference really quick. You've heard all the thumps and all of the noise from these rattle, okay, rattle traps, lipless crankbaits, okay. Compare that to, say, the small square bill, okay, because the blanks are different, okay. The inside of a square bill blank has more of a vacuum cavity. You can see, depending on S crank, megabat, whatever, you could just kind of tell. They're just a little bit, have a bigger vacuum inside the blank, right? And so, listen to the noise in this square bill. Totally different. Totally different action. Totally different action from the bill. Totally different action from the crankbait itself, and totally different noise. One of my favorite crankbaits right here, one of my favorite crankbait patterns, can be painted in any crankbait, lipless crankbait that you want. Mimics any of the shiner profiles in the Susquehanna River. Right here. Doesn't matter. You can add a couple other colors here towards the bottom, okay, during different times of the year. And the neat tip or trick about that coloration pattern is male shiners before spawn, and some minnows, change colors, okay? They start to get a yellow and red, again, yellow and red to greenish hinge to them as males approach the spawning period. Interesting biological thing, okay? Still the same species. You look at it and you think it's a different, it's not. They're still shiners, okay? But the noise is different, the rattle's different, the presentation's different. It's a square bill, 1.5 to 2.5. Lipless are up here, square bills are diving deeper, right? Totally different. Same theories based on, depending on where your fish are relating to. So if you have any questions about any of the baits that I talked about, rattles, thumps, crankbait painting, any of the resources for you in terms of getting access to a custom bait maker to get work done for you, we'll do that. I'm going to start to get everyone's contact information for the cooperative. So easy resource for you to reach out. Because I'm going to tell you, these guys, there are some specialist mates that only do crankbaits, only do glide baits. These guys are incredible. Swim baits, okay? It's unbelievable. Jerk baits. I didn't say that earlier. Then there's the jerk crank inside there's the jerk bait community of painters. Crazy sick stuff. I'll cover some of those in a video here later today if we get completely washed out. But that's just an update on lipless crankbaits. I know how to mate. Asked me about, the different rattle, different noise for lipless, and so I did this video. I had a perfect opportunity today. Mother Nature does her thing. Hopefully we'll be able to get out in the afternoon. If not, well, we'll be on the water tomorrow regardless. So hope everybody's enjoyed this video. I'll post this on Facebook. Probably too long to post on Instagram, but I hope everybody has a blessed weekend coming up. Be safe out there. Make sure you take all the safety precautions. And all right, mates, make a friend at the ramp.